Thank you all so much for joining us today. I am Marisa Ciesluk, and I'm excited to welcome you all on behalf of the Divorce Edit, which is a group of women who are helping other women navigate divorce. And I'm excited to be with you all today to explore this conversation about self-doubt and the inner critic. And so, again, I'm glad that you all are here. And let's get started. So before we get started, let me share my screen with you. All right. Let me share my screen so that you can see my slides. All right, here we go. So the cost of self-doubt during divorce, especially for women, is enormous. Now, all women grapple with a voice of self-doubt, but during divorce, it gets louder. It gets really loud, okay? It sounds like, am I being selfish? It sounds like, am I ruining my kids' lives? Can I trust myself to make good decisions right now? Or what if I'm making a terrible mistake? So my question for you all today is, what would you do if self-doubt wasn't running the show? What would you do if self-doubt wasn't running the show? Would you ask for what you actually want in the settlement process? Would you trust yourself to make the right decisions for you and your family? Would you stop apologizing for choosing yourself? So that is what our session today is really designed to help you with, to identify what that voice is and how you can change your relationship with it so that you can move through this season grounded in who you are and grounded in what you truly need. So the first thing that we need to tackle is, how do you recognize this inner critic voice? What is that voice? How do we change it? So the inner critic voice is really the voice of not me, right? It's this internal chatter that tells you you are making a mistake, that you are selfish, that you have ruined everything, that you should have tried harder, and that you can't trust yourself to make the right decisions right now. So the first thing that we have to do with inner critic work is really recognize that we are hearing from the inner critic voice. Because there's so many women, and especially when you are navigating this idea of maybe contemplating a divorce or going through the divorce process, you have these thoughts that are going through your brain that are saying you're failing your kids, everyone thinks you're giving up too easily, you should be handling this better, right? And that becomes the background noise that we start to live with. And it becomes so constant that you don't even notice it anymore. So I want to give you some ways to recognize your inner critic voice. So the first one is that it is very harsh, it is very rude, and it is very mean. So a good litmus test for you is, if you would not say it to your best friend or a good friend, then that is most likely your inner critic. So most likely, you would not say to your best friend, you're being selfish, or you're destroying your family, or you can't do anything right? Like, we wouldn't say those things to a good friend. So if you hear that voice, that is most likely your inner critic. The other way, or another way that you can do it, is it's very binary, it's very extreme. It's just black or white thinking, there's no room for gray. So what that sounds like is, you're a really good mom, or you are a terrible mom, or you made the right choice, or you have ruined everything, right? So you can hear that black and white, that very extreme, very binary thinking. The next one is the voice of reason. And this one is really tricky because it's going to argue for what seems to be like in your best interest. And so you're going to hear this voice and you're going to be like, oh, that's very realistic. It's simply trying to be very protective of me. So what that voice sounds like is, if you ask for what you really need in the settlement, you'll look greedy. So you better just accept what's been offered to you so you can keep the peace. Or it might sound like, don't trust yourself right now. You know what? You're just too emotional to make good decisions. That's the voice of inner critic. And so you can hear how it might sound like the voice of reason. Some other ways that you might recognize that inner critic voice is that it's often automatic. It feels like an audio tape that is just running automatically in your head. And it is often interrupting or intruding your thoughts. So what might happen is that you are trying to focus on a conversation with your lawyer, and suddenly you hear this voice that says, you're making a huge mistake, right? That is the inner critic showing up. Another way that you can identify that inner critic is that it is repetitive. So oftentimes it's going to repeat the same narrative that you've been hearing for decades, and it's going to get louder and louder during the season of divorce. And it's that same critical thought that has been showing up over and over again that keeps you stuck, that keeps you not being able to move forward. So it's that voice that says, you're not good enough, or you should have tried harder. You're failing your kids. It's that repetitive voice that just keeps showing up. The next way that you can know if it is your inner critic is that it's irrational. You know that that voice doesn't make sense, but yet it remains very persistent, right? So you know logically that you are doing your best with the resources that you have right now. You know that the decision that you made took courage. You know that you are capable and competent. And yet there's this fearful voice in your head that still has power over you, that very irrational voice. And then this last way, it's a sneaky one. It's what I call the 1-2 punch, right? It is the one that's going to attack you with these critical thoughts, and then it's going to shame you for having those critical thoughts. So this is what it sounds like. It sounds like, what's wrong with you? All the other divorced women seem to have it together. They know what to do. Why don't you? Just look how calm she is over there. Or it might criticize your decision to divorce or explore divorce, and then it shames you for doubting yourself. So it might be like, see, you can't even trust your own judgment. What's wrong with you? So those are some of the ways to start to recognize your inner critic voice. Now, one of the biggest questions that I get about the inner critic is, how do I know if this is an inner critic voice or if this is just simply realistic thinking? And that's a great question. And sometimes our self-critique feels true. Sometimes it feels like we're just being honest with ourselves about our situation. But here's what happens. We have confused realistic thinking with pessimistic thinking. So our inner critic voice is our limited narrative of what we think is possible. And that limited narrative has been shaped by our fear. It's been shaped by our past hurts. And it's shaped by what we think we're allowed to want, right? So we think that we are being realistic. Now, worst case scenario thinking is a hallmark quality of the inner critic. So if you notice that you are going to worst case scenario, that is most likely your inner critic thinking. Here's what it sounds like. If I ask for what I need, this is going to get ugly. Or I'll never be able to afford to live on my own. My kids are going to hate me for this for the rest of my life, right? That's the worst case scenario thinking. That is a hallmark quality of the inner critic. The realistic thinking is different, okay? It is inquisitive, it is exploratory, and it is highly creative. It is going to help you move forward. It is going to help you seek solutions, and it is going to be grounded, and it's going to be clear-eyed. So what your inner critic is going to say is, I don't have what it takes to get through this. I'm going to mess this up. I should just accept whatever is offered and move on. But the realistic thinking, and I want you to hear the difference, the realistic thinking is going to say, I wonder what support I need to navigate this well. Maybe I need to reach out to those amazing, brilliant women within the divorce edit and see if they can help me. Or your realistic thinking might say, what do I actually want here? And how can I work toward that with the resources that I have or with the resources that I need? Or realistic thinking might say, this is really hard. And also, I am capable of figuring this out. So you hear the difference between the inner critic thinking and the realistic thinking. So let's talk about what is the inner critic. So you might hear the inner critic term and you might think, oh, that's my protector. or that's my safety mechanism. Some people call the inner critic your judge or your ego or your saboteur. Some people will say that your inner critic is your mom internalized, and we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But the inner critic really has three layers. The first is your nervous system. That's your physiological layer, and that's your safety instinct. The second is the cultural layer, and the third is your individual layer. So let's unpack each of those layers real quick. The inner critic is hardwired in all of us. It is an expression of the safety instinct that exists within us. It is hardwired in us, right? It is helping us to survive and to protect us from threat. Your safety instinct is designed to constantly scan the environment and ask, is there a threat? And if so, how will I survive? So this is something that you want inside of you, especially if you're in a dangerous situation, like getting ready to fall over the side of a cliff or a bridge or something like that. You want that safety instinct to be there. But the safety instinct is really designed to help us keep safe from physical threats. It cannot differentiate between a physical threat and an emotional threat. So what we have to recognize here is that the inner critic is a strategy and not a reflection of reality. That's how you take away its power. So the safety instinct is on alert for failure. It's on alert for uncertainty and unknowns, and it is on alert for social estrangement or stigma. So those are the things that in our modern lives, what the safety instinct is looking for. Now, when you're navigating the season of divorce, your inner critic is going to speak up with way more viciousness and way more volume because we are exposing ourselves to a real or perceived vulnerability, right? So it is asking, is there any possibility of failure? Is there any possibility that I might be judged? Is there any possibility that I might be disliked? Is there any possibility that I might be criticized or rejected? Will people think that I'm selfish? Will I lose what stability I have? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, that safety instinct, that inner critic is going to kick into high gear, okay? So that's why your safety instinct is pretty overactive, especially during this time in this season, when everything feels uncertain, and feels very raw and very exposed. The challenge is that the inner critic is like your risk management department. And like many risk management departments, your inner critic thinks that it is running the whole show. It thinks I am the only department and the only thing that matters is your safety and your survival. But the safety instinct is only one department inside of you, okay? And so we can't let it run the show. Another layer of your inner critic is the cultural aspect of it. So what did you learn in the cultures that you're a part of that is and is not acceptable? And this is really important to think about and kind of unpack. Maybe you learned that being self-sacrificing is what's lovable and what's embraced, right? Maybe you learned that divorce means failure. Maybe you learned that good women don't put themselves first, or good women don't get divorced. So I want you to think about, what are the cultural norms? What are the things that you learned from the cultures and the groups that you're a part of about what is acceptable, about what is lovable, and what is safe? So some women have experienced what we call the tall poppy syndrome. And they have this narrative within that culture that don't be the tall poppy in the field. Don't stand up taller than all of the rest. And don't you dare think that you deserve more than what you have been given. So if that's the cultural narrative that you have inherited, it makes sense why it's really scary for you to ask for what you actually need in a settlement process, or to imagine a future that is fully yours. Some folks, and myself included in this one, we've inherited this good woman narrative, right? You can navigate divorce, but you better do it gracefully. Don't be angry, don't be messy, don't ask for too much, put your kids first, but don't let this affect them. Be strong, but not too strong. Keep it together, right? So these are the cultural messages that shape what that inner critic is saying to you as you are navigating divorce. And then the last layer is the individual stories. These individual stories come from a sibling or a teacher or a parent or your ex-partner, your ex. maybe your advisor, or a manager, right? They've all planted some specific narrative of self-doubt. So maybe it sounds like you're too sensitive, or you always give up when things get too hard, or, and this one's true for me, you're not good with money, or you're too much, right? What I want you to know is that the inner critic is there no matter what. And this is where, I mentioned earlier about sometimes people say this sounds like their internalized messages from their mom, or this is their mom. This is where that shows up. The inner critic is there no matter what. It's in all of us, but the individual experiences and the individual narratives that you have been fed is what shapes what it says. And again, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, especially during divorce, these old narratives are going to get really, really loud. So here's what I want you to know. I want you to get to know your inner critic. I want you to start to build a wiser relationship with it. And I'm going to tell you how to do that in just a few moments. But I want you to think about first, what does your inner critic say? What does your inner critic say? In my work with women navigating divorce, here are some of the most common inner critic messages that I hear. And I want to share these with you for a couple of reasons. One, I want to share this with you as a collective reflection and a collective witnessing of what other women that are experiencing divorce are hearing from their inner critic. But I also want to let you know that you are not alone. So whatever your inner critic is saying, you are not alone. You are not alone. So as I read these out loud, I want you to notice which ones land for you. See what it feels like for you in your body, in your chest, in your arms, in your neck. See what it feels like to hear them, right? You might feel a little punch in your chest. You might feel a tightness in your chest, or you just might recognize that voice. So just listen to these inner critic messages from women that are navigating divorce as I read through them. A good mother wouldn't do this. If you were stronger, you could have made this marriage work. If you ask for what you actually need in the settlement, you're going to look greedy and you're going to look vindictive. Your kids are going to remember this as the time that you chose yourself over them. You're going to end up all alone, and it's going to be all your fault. You should be grateful for what you have. Other people have it so much worse. You're the one who chose this, so you don't get to be upset about it. You'll never be financially stable on your own. You're the one tearing this family apart. A good mother would figure out how to make this marriage work for her kids. You didn't try hard enough to make it work. You just gave up. Everyone warned you that this marriage wouldn't work, and you didn't listen. So here's my invitation for you. After our session today, I want you to take a moment and just jot down what your inner critic says most often. Maybe it's some of these messages here that I just shared. Maybe it's something different. And you don't have to share it with anyone. It's just for you, but that's how you begin to develop a relationship with your inner critic. Here are some things that you can think about as you think about what is your inner critic saying to you. Think about, what does your inner critic say about choosing divorce? What does it say about your parenting during this transition? What does it say about what's possible for you now or post-divorce? And what does it say about how you're showing up right now? So start to think about that and give that a little bit of thought. I think that will be a very empowering and very impactful and illuminating exercise for you. So I want to share a couple ways that you think you can quiet the voice, but are actually not very effective. The first two are arguing with it or getting angry with it. When we argue or get angry at our inner critic, it actually makes the inner critic much louder, right? It gives it more power. And the truth is, the reality is, we are never going to win an argument with our inner critic. And the reason why is because you can win argument 1,245 about why you're making a mistake or why you shouldn't get divorced. But your inner critic is just going to move right on to reason number 1,246. It's just going to be this never-ending rabbit hole. And also, while you're arguing with it, you're also not making decisions, you're not moving forward, and you're not taking care of yourself and your well-being. So I want you to think about your inner critic as you're dealing with a scared child, right? Arguing with that child or getting angry with that child is not going to feel supportive. It's not going to relieve their fears. And the same thing is true with your inner critic. Now, can arguing back or getting angry with it be helpful for a time? Sure, but it's not a long-term solution, okay? Another thing that I hear a lot of times is, well, Marisa, I'm feeling self-doubt, so that means that I'm not on the right track. Actually, quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite. Our inner critic often flares up when we are on the right track, when we are making a brave choice, when we are setting a boundary, when we are asking for what we need. That's when your inner critic is going to get really loud because you are stepping into something that really matters. Self-doubt during divorce doesn't mean that you're making the right choice or doesn't mean that you're making the wrong choice. What it usually means is that you're making a choice that requires a lot of courage. Now, I hear you saying, well, doesn't my inner critic help me to be better? Doesn't it keep me from making mistakes? Again, it might help you to prepare more. It might help you to anticipate problems. It might help you to work harder to avoid judgment. But what it's really doing is motivating you to be compliant, to keep the peace, and to not rock the boat. And so that's not going to allow you to show up with courage and with clarity. It's not going to allow you to take that bold leap or do what is really needed from you, like asking for what you truly need or setting a boundary or building the life that is actually yours. I also want to say that the cost of being motivated by fear, being motivated by your inner critic, when you are being driven by stress and by fear hormones, that's going to eventually take a toll on your body. It's going to take a toll on your mind, and it's going to take a toll on your well-being. It is not healthy, and it is not sustainable to be motivated by fear or stress, especially during this season that's already physically or emotionally depleting. So what do you do with all of this information? I'm glad you asked. I want to give you a toolkit of things that you can do, quick practices that you can use in the moment. So let's just walk through a few of these things. The first thing is identifying it as a voice, right? Notice when you're hearing from your inner critic. You are not the critical voice. You are the one that is aware of it. That is foundational. You are not the critical voice. You are the one that is aware of it. And so when you notice that voice, you can say, oh, wait, that's my inner critic talking, right? And when you do that, you create distance from it. And when you create distance from it, when you recognize that it is a voice within you and not the ultimate authority, when you recognize that it's not the primary one, then you can start to see it for what it is. You have other voices. You have the voice of wisdom. You have the voice of intuition and compassion and clarity. Your inner critic is just one of the loudest voices right now because you're doing something big and something hard. This is one of my favorite tools. Give your inner critic a character, right? So look over what your inner critic's common narratives are and then brainstorm some adjectives that describe your inner critic's personality. Create a character. Bring your inner critic's voice to mind when you start to hear it. You can invent a character, or you can pick a character from film or literature, pop culture, politics, whatever. But give them a name and give them a visual. So my inner critic is Miranda from The Devil Wears Prada. So whenever I hear her, I'm like, oh, there's Miranda. She's showing up, right? So that helps to create the separation. And again, it reminds you that this is not me. This is simply a voice that I am hearing. Another way that you can do this is to ground in a new perspective. So what does this mean? It means compassionately seeing your inner critic's motives. So remember we talked about the safety instinct. So ask yourself, what is my safety instinct not like about this situation? What feels scary or uncertain about this situation? What is my safety instinct feeling worried about in this situation? Again, thinking about it as a scared child. Also think about your inner critic and look for the humor. This is one of my favorite ones. So, if you hear your inner critic saying, if you ask for what you need in this settlement, you're going to end up homeless and alone forever. You can just say to it, really? Really? One conversation is going to determine my entire future? That is absolutely absurd. Or if you are saying to yourself, everyone at my kid's school is judging me and they're talking about me. Oh, really? Is there a group chat and you're the main topic? Like, did you poll all 200 parents at your school, right? Are they all just sitting around and talking about you specifically? We know that's unlikely. So find the humor in those situations. Find the absurdity and the ridiculousness in those situations. And if you need more of those, I can give you some more of those. All right, the other couple other ones, ground in a new perspective, is checking in with your inner mentor. So the opposite of your inner critic is your inner mentor. It's that wiser, more passionate, kinder self. So ask, what does that future self need right now? What does she have to say or he have to say about the situation? And then ask yourself, how can you lead with a core value and let that lead you instead? So ask yourself, what do I need more of or want more of in this season? How might I let my values guide me instead of my fear? And some of those values might include courage or honesty or love or compassion. It can include clarity or rest or self-trust. So what are those values that you might let lead you instead of that fear that's showing up from your inner critic? And then the last set of tools are somatic tools, right? So one of the things that you can do is remove your inner critic from the scene. So when I notice that Miranda is showing up, I will literally get up from my location and walk her out the door. And I will keep doing that until she leaves. So that's one way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it is put all of your thoughts, your inner critic thoughts, into a box or a cup or a bowl. So I have this sitting right here on my desk. You can either write down your inner critic narratives and just put them in the box and put them away, or you can pantomime it if that works better for you, if you don't have a voice or a box sitting right there on your desk. You can also just picture the voice receding off into space, right? Just turning down the volume or turning down the volume, whichever way you do that. Or you can just imagine it, drifting off and away so that you don't hear it from it or see it anymore. All right, our time is coming to a close. So here's what I want to leave you with. The goal here is not unfailing confidence. The goal here is a wiser, more effective relationship with your self-doubt. The bad news is that your inner critic isn't going anywhere. You can't remove it. The good news is that you don't need it to be silent in order to move forward. You don't need confidence before you act. You don't need certainty before you decide. You don't need permission to trust yourself. What you need, the women who navigate divorce with the most clarity and strength aren't the ones without self-doubt. They're the ones who hear it and move forward anyway. They ask for what they need, knowing the voice will call them selfish. They set boundaries, knowing that the voice is going to say it's too much. They rebuild their lives, knowing that that voice is going to question every single step they've made. But what you've learned today is how to recognize your inner critic, understand where it comes from, and stop letting it make decisions for you. So now I want to leave you with that same question that we started with. What will you do, not when the self-doubt is gone, but while it's still there? Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. We're grateful for your time. If anyone has any questions, I will stay put. You're welcome to just send me a text or send me a chat. Thank you so much. If you need support from the Divorce Edit, we are a group of women that are willing and able to help you and support you in whatever way that you need, whether it is you need a real estate agent, whether you need a divorce lawyer or a divorce mediator, whether you need a financial planner, a career coach, Whatever you need during this time, we are a supportive group of women that are ready to work with you and guide you through this process. Thank you so much.